Yeah, that's what you gotta watch out for. Like at the city, the camera's only on you when you're talking.
Yeah.
And so like
You're
it's
at
All right. Okay. It is July 20th, and we're going to continue on with our budget hearings. And next up is Parks and Recreation. So take it away, Tim.
All right, well, good to see you all again. Tim Laurent, Parks and Recreation Department. We'll jump right into it. Thought I'd share our mission statement. Whoa, okay, we're still good. Shawnee County Parks and Recreation is an essential service established to improve the quality of life for all residents of the county by proactively responding to changing demographics, emerging trends, while maximizing all available resources and providing quality parks, recreation facilities, and programs that enhance the residents' health, promotes economic vitality, and long-term sustainability now and for future generations. I think that was possibly the longest mission statement ever created. We tried to amend that this year, but we didn't quite get it done. So, vision statement: Shawnee County Parks and Recreation, in partnership with the citizens of Topeka and Shawnee County, will develop and manage accessible, walkable parks, recreation facilities, and programs through a collaborative leadership process that provides a long-term perspective for how Parks and Recreation will impact the livability and economic value of living in the city and the county. So with that, I wanted to give just a brief overview of our organization. So you can see we have three main divisions. What's not listed on there, and I'll start with those, is Linda Kelly, who's in charge of all of our administrative services. So really, I put these up there because they're the biggest. Hers might be the most important, and I definitely rely on Linda a lot. Probably through this presentation, I'll have to call on her at some point. Olivia Mayer is also in charge of our professional development division. So Linda and Olivia both report directly to me, as well as Randy Luby, who is our park services director. Randy's in charge of, you can see what they do here: park police, athletics, camps, the campground, recreation programming, which is a big area. Susan Hensler heads that division. Special events, aquatics, amenities, concessions, and all of our community centers. So under John Boyd, planning, he's our planning and development director, and he's in charge of obviously planning, our project management, our fleet services, facility maintenance, grants, contracts, and compliance. And then park operations director is Jeremy Myers. Jeremy's in charge of all of our ground maintenance, so that's park maintenance and waterways and horticulture, forestry, trails, natural areas, golf, and our one cemetery. So that's a real brief rundown of our organization. We have a nice organizational chart, but it's a little too hard to read up here. So with that, I'll jump into just some department challenges. So COVID-19, just like everybody else, I think because of the nature of what we do and that we interact with people on just a daily basis, COVID has been, I don't want to say it's been more of a challenge for us than anybody else, but it has been a significant challenge. So it seems like we've sat around and made a lot of plans and then just to turn around the next day and start all over again. But because of COVID-19, we have really sort of slowed down this year on the projects that we've been able to complete. We're down over $700,000 in revenue, which is a lot. And we've tried to compensate that by reducing our expenses. And I think we've done a pretty good, maybe too good of a job there, because I think we're down close to $1 million or so less expenses where we were at this time last year. So that doesn't mean there's not a lot of things to do. There's a ton of things to do, and that sort of leads into the next challenge, which is department maintenance or deferred maintenance. We've got a lot of projects. I know you guys have heard about this for several years now. I think we've made a lot of headway, but there's a lot left to do. I mentioned just a few things on here, and the mini train and the tracks. I know on my CIP request, I have the mini train on there, but it's not for a few years. But by the time I submitted that, until today, we've had a company come in and evaluate the train and the tracks. And I think the situation is probably a little more dire than we thought. There's some significant issues with the tracks that I think we're going to need to address sooner rather than later. Obviously, parks, community centers. I won't go through the list because I know you guys have talked about this a lot, but there's a lot to do. And again, I think we've made great progress in the last year and a half, but there's still a lot left to do. Equipment replacement, always a challenge. We have made some strides there too with your support. We bought new mowers. I know Brent Holsetter and the lease program has really done wonders for us from a vehicle standpoint. But I listed a few things here. Our bucket truck, we have a dump truck and a backhoe. They're all mid-90s or older. They're really all at the end of their useful life. So the bucket truck, and then instead of a dump truck, we want to look at what's called a hook lift truck, which can be used for a dump truck, but it's a versatile piece of equipment that can be used for several different things. Those are both $100,000 plus purchases. So that's big ticket items. A mini excavator, like I said, we have a backhoe that's in bad shape, and it's big. Really, something a little smaller that would get in and out of parks a little easier in some tight spaces would probably benefit us more than having a big backhoe. So that's just an example. Obviously, we still have a lot of old vehicles out there that are rusting out, and we could use a few more mowers. But you can only buy so much equipment if you don't have people to use that equipment. So staffing levels, and you guys, I'm trying to go quickly, but if you have questions, please interrupt me.
Mr. Chairman, Tim, on the equipment replacement, rather than buying the bucket truck, the hook lift, the mini excavator, et cetera, can we look at maybe doing some rentals? I mean, because you're not going to need an excavator every day.
No, that's very fair, and I think that as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing is off the table. I think the only issue I'm not saying rentals wouldn't work. I think that it would.
I mean, you've got $41 million listed in your CIP plan for 5 years.
Correct.
I mean, the only people that had more listed was, I think, Solid Public Works at $44 million. So, I mean, but $41 million for one department over 5 years, you guys have got everybody else lapped 3 times over. I'm exaggerating a bit, but not by much.
Right.
And so.
Well, I don't want to necessarily sit here and discuss other people's plans, but I would guess that when you look at the size of the department and the amount of property and the amount of things that we have to do, it probably is quite a bit bigger than what some of these other departments are dealing with. I have no illusion. I understand that we're not going to get all of that money, but I think it's important that I put it out there so that you see it and you know what the needs are. I realize we don't have an endless bucket of money that we're pulling from, so that's why we list it and try to make the best decisions that we can. Yeah.
Kind of on that same vein of conversation there is with those equipment, are any of these things that Parks or that Public Works might have that we could borrow from department to department, or even pay them a rental fee rather than going through a private contractor?
You know, I don't want to speak for the Public Works Director, but I imagine that if he would be willing to rent that, let us rent it or borrow it, either one, that would be a great solution for us. I know he probably doesn't want to take staff off his projects and have them come work on our projects because I don't know that he has enough staff. So if he would be willing to do that, we would certainly be willing to use it. And we could look at these items, like even these ones listed. The bucket truck, to me, if you think about how many trees we have in our system, and we have two people working in our forestry department, which that in itself that's hardly enough to even be safe, quite honestly. You've got to make sure you've got intermittent staff there too. But we desperately need to upgrade the equipment in that division, and they use that bucket truck quite a bit. And I know there's a grapple, forget the name of it, another piece that they'd really like to have. But I think we've really got to get there's a lot of things, obviously, but I feel like that particular area we really need to get serious about, because the ash trees are dying, and pretty soon we're going to have to get serious about that. I know that a few years ago they started kind of doing an inventory and coming up with how many we had. Well, you just drive around Lake Shawnee and you can pick them out because they're looking bad, and we're going to need to, we quite honestly, in my opinion, are behind the curve on that. We should be proactively removing them and replacing them with new trees, but quite honestly, with two guys in our forestry department, we don't have time to do that. We just don't.
Bucket truck's pretty critical, and it gets, I know from Parks and Rec for years, that it gets used by everybody in Parks and Rec when they have to work
Absolutely.
on a ball field light or something
Absolutely,
on
it's
the
very
side of a
versatile.
rec center, something up on the roof or something. Yeah, they're used all the time.
Right. Well, I started to say, too, that all the equipment in the world is great, but if you don't have enough staff to use it, then it doesn't do you any good. And I don't think we're too terribly off, but I think we are, for a department of our size and a community of this size, I don't think we're at the staffing level that we need to be. And even if you go back before the consolidation, and you look at what the city had in place and what we had in place prior to that, we're quite a bit less than that as a combined department. Now, there should be some efficiencies gained by, combining everything. But when you look at the amount of money that was being spent 8 years ago or 9 years ago before the merger compared to what's being spent now, it's quite a bit, it's a couple $1 million less, I believe. So anyway, I know there's I listened to Public Works presentation the other day, and I think he was talking about having trouble hiring, and we're in that same boat. And we were kind of not excited, but thinking one of the windfalls of people losing their jobs would be that we'd be able to hire those people, but we're not getting the kind of applications that we hope. And I think wages probably plays a little bit of role into that. I haven't done an official study, but I believe our staff's probably not compensated to the level of some of the other major cities in the state. And I'd like to be selfishly picking from the best when we're taking applications. So I welcome the wage study whenever that happens. I think grounds maintenance, natural areas, horticulture, and facility maintenance are really the areas where we need staff. I think we're not in a perfect situation, but we're in a pretty good situation on the recreation side and the programming side. But where we're really, I think, lacking is just the boots on the ground, so to speak. Yeah.
Tim, in terms of staffing, how many of your folks are kind of siloed into their own area, or are they cross-training between one department and another?
Sure.
You mentioned forestry. I mean, how many of your guys have like arborist certifications that they can
Right.
use, and maybe we'll give them a bump in pay for doing something like that?
Well, that's a great, I love that idea. I don't know how many of them are certified other than the folks in our forestry. I think it's a fair statement to say that we are fairly siloed. But I think part of that is because there's not really enough people to spread out. Horticulture staff, there's so many flower beds across town, Ward Mead and Ted Inslee and the Rose Garden, and then just all the other little flower beds everywhere, that they are going from spot to spot to spot to spot, and they're not getting it covered, quite frankly. So I can't share them with anybody.
Right.
And so you have places like Felker, where we've got landscaping inside the complex, and that suffers because they just don't get to it enough. I mean, even things, this year's been a hard year for the Rose Garden. So I really feel pretty firmly or pretty strongly that we need more help in that regard. And on our grounds maintenance, I think counting the supervisor, we have 7 staff to do that. And so you'll see later that we've increased our contracts a little bit to try to help offset some of that. And you did let me you approved some park maintenance workers last year, so that's 6 more people that we got on the ground, and we spread those out between ground maintenance, natural areas, and golf. And so that's helped us out. But I don't think it's from a lack of not wanting to spread them out. I just really don't think they have enough time to go do things outside of what they're already doing.
Tim, how many vacancies do you have right now?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I think we've probably got 5, huh? Well, we've got over 20 vacancies that I don't even look at because I don't think I have enough money to fill all those vacancies and operate. So when I'm thinking about vacancies, I'm thinking about positions that we've had filled previously and are vacant right now. I mean, previously in my tenure, so to speak. So,
Commissioner,
yeah,
Yes.
there are 26 vacant positions that are included in his budget request.
there you go.
26.
Okay. Unforeseen expenses. I mean, I don't know that there's anything you can do about it, but it's definitely a department challenge. And this year and last year have been, we've had a lot. We had the Shunga Trail just recently, which is coming along nicely, I think. I saw that they were forming the trail, getting ready to pour. I don't know where we are on it, but I imagine that's probably happened by now. Oh, the rain, yeah, rain slowed us down, but Rossville Pool opened last Friday. Hopefully to rave reviews. And you knew about the baby pool at Shawnee North, and that was closed for 2 years, but we've got that open this year. And then Blaisdell Aquatic Facility is really the last one. You approved an emergency purchase here just recently, and we've actually got a little bit more that will come before you in the future to sort of complete that project. So not much that you can do about those, but just thought I'd give a brief overview. Curtis Shop relocation, that's where our fleet shop is. I think with what happened today in the Great Overland Station that we may see some movement. I mean, I would hope that we would, now that we're sitting there and we can start to develop that area. I think we're in a great situation, but we've really got to find a place to move that shop. And I know John Boyd toured, it's an old elementary school right next to Rice Community Center last week. Building's not in bad shape, but I think by the time you got rid of the asbestos and replaced the roof, we could probably build a Morton building somewhere by one of our other shops just as, maybe even cheaper. So, but we do need to do something there. I don't want to be the ones that are holding back that transformation. So, and then Great Overland Station, I think we're excited about it. We're a little bit apprehensive, just from a monetary standpoint, but we can get to it. But I do think that we're going to be able to take that facility and really breathe some new life into it. So we're excited about it. Some accomplishments over the last year. So we installed new playground equipment and safety surfacing in 10 parks. Hughes Park is still in progress. I don't know if you remember, there's a retaining wall there that's in bad shape, so we're trying to get that retaining wall fixed before we put the playground in, but that should happen soon. Partnered with AARP to install expression swing in Ripley Park and a fit lot at Willow Park. New park signage in 23 different parks. Repaired children's pool at Shawnee North. New press box and bleachers at Lake Shawnee Girls Complex. Partnered with Public Works on the East Edge Road Reclamation Project. We spent just short of $250,000 on concrete replacement in a year. So that's sidewalks, that's curbing around playground equipment, that's trails, that's everywhere. Hillcrest Community Center's nearing completion. The Adventure Cove Water Quality Project, the pumps and the screens is complete. The floating playground is here. Unfortunately, we didn't get to roll that out, but that gives us something to look forward to next year. Milfoil treatment at Lake Shawnee. We got a healthy report card from those folks here a few weeks ago saying they surveyed the whole lake. They didn't see any milfoil, so we feel good about that. And then resurfaced pickleball courts at Hughes Park. I think that turned out amazing, so we're really proud of that. So unless there's any questions, I'll go into some budget highlights. I don't have a lot here. Our original budget request came in at about a 1% increase. We added the Great Overland Station budget request. That was $349,618. That bumped our request up to about 3% increase over last year. We reduced our intermittent staff funding by over $115,000. I think that's because we upped the contracts a little bit, also because we hired some park maintenance workers, and also we're just looking at the trends, and if staff aren't spending that money, we found other places to use it. But we're trying to be as responsible as we can, I guess is the point. Capital improvement plan. Any questions about the budget before we move on? If I can get out of this.
All right.
No? Can't get my,
I do have a comment before you
Yeah.
get into the budget. Commissioner Mays, just to give you a little history on this too, when you're looking at comparing budget years, in history, you kind of have to look at it a little differently, because we have taken several areas out of the general fund balance and moved it into its own fund. There were certain areas that they really wanted to be self-sustaining, and so then if they had additional revenue coming in, then they could do some improvements and things like that. So and it was over a period of a few years, it wasn't all at once, but the 2 golf courses, not the Forbes course, but the other 2 golf courses, the premier summer camps, the campground, and then the cemetery. At one time, the cemetery was pretty much covered by that, and it's moved out. I think that's all, aren't they? So, when you're comparing, so that budget is actually in a separate fund now. So if you're really comparing what was spent in prior years, you kind of have to adjust for that in the process. Just give you a little history.
All right,
Yeah.
thanks.
I will note that when I started looking back 9 years ago, I did include those revolving funds in the total of what we're spending now. I don't talk about the revolving funds much in this presentation, but they do present some challenges. When we talk about COVID and you talk about golf, the golf revolving fund was really making us extremely nervous there for a while. It's bounced back pretty nicely. But yeah, it does provide a little bit of flexibility, but it also provides a little bit of stress. All right, so our capital improvement plan. What I tried to do here, and I don't know if this will help or hurt, but I tried to group these together in about 5 different categories. So the first category is long-term planning. So if you look in that, we're talking about the Gage Park Master Plan, the department master plan. So I think we refer to the department plan so often, but I think we need to remember that plan was rolled out in 2014, 2015. So it's about to the end of its life. We need to start thinking about it anyway. So I've got it here in year 3. And then Lake Shawnee, we've talked about doing some additional improvements there, along with Adventure Cove. And I think we're at a point where if we are going to move that way, we need to do this market feasibility study and decide whether if that's something we want to really pursue or not. And I don't think we'll really know until we do that feasibility study. You go down to the next category here, and I've got access and safety for existing facilities. So the big one here, is the ADA transition plan. And then after that, the implementation. So that's a big one. I mentioned, the Ruger complex. We have a retaining wall there that's failing, that really needs to be looked at. Safety and guardrails are something that we do on an annual basis, so we included them. They'll need to be done whether they're funded here or funded out of our own budget. So next section is really our 3R, renovation, rehabilitation, and replacement of existing facilities. So we've got the community center at Central Park. We've got the community center at Oakland. We've got HVAC programs. We've got Lake Shawnee water quality, because we know down the road we'll have to treat for milfoil again. We've got the dock replacements at Lake Shawnee. Parks and playgrounds, so I know this one's talked about a lot. Upgrade and improve existing parks or playgrounds, add new playgrounds, so we've put quite a bit of money there. Outdoor sports courts, about every 4 or 5 years, we know we're going to have to do a lot of these. So parks and trail restrooms, park maintenance equipment we've talked about, park roads and parking lots, park signage and wayfinding signs. I know right now I'm really interested in doing something at Lake Shawnee. I don't know if you've driven by and looked at the sign there off 29th Street and West Edge Road, but it is in bad shape. So we're working on coming up with a plan for that right now. Roofing projects, and then obviously sidewalks and trails, which mostly concrete. So that's really what we've put down in our 3R. And then you get down to what I think is more traditional capital improvement projects. This first one, the Deer Creek Trail, that's really the extension from Robinson Family Nature Area to Lake Shawnee. So when Deer Creek Trail's done, this will be the next step. And it would be great to get that done as soon as possible, because so Family Park, we're going to start public engagement Thursday. I think we'll be up here talking about it on Thursday. So that's right around the corner. Saloon at Old Prairie Town, that provides a larger rental space there, additional revenue that can be generated from that. Lake Shawnee Girls Softball, that's phase 2, so that's concessions, shade structures, restrooms, small office with a gate where you enter, so control the entering and exiting a little better. Gage Park Mini Train, like I said, I put that out in 2024. I don't know. That one, we were actually working with the foundation a little bit to try to do some private fundraising to see if we can come up with some money that way. I think that's one that we should have some success with. Helen Hawker Theater. I know you've all driven by through Gage Park, and with the new Kay's Garden and the facility they've built there, the Helen Hawker is just overpowered. Whether we rebuild it or move it, I think we need to address that as well. And I've mentioned Riverfront Park. I'm excited about the possibilities coming up there. And I think we're getting to the last section here. So these are capital improvement projects that are in our existing, I have enterprise funds, but revolving funds, the Lake Shawnee Campground. Really need to do a master plan for that, and then go in and start to review or rejuvenate that. It's got some very old and outdated connections and things that the spaces out there really aren't big enough to accommodate the large campers that we're dealing with today. So that needs to be done. And let's see here, Lake Shawnee Golf Course, and I know at the end, at some point, we're going to need to address that clubhouse and make some changes there. I don't know that we can fund that size of a project. I know right now we certainly couldn't out of our revolving fund. And I think I might have skipped a couple here, but I think that about covers it. I know back up here on the top, I want to also clear up that I skipped Felker Park Trail and the crossover restroom. So what that is, it's we're working with the Topeka Tennis Association right now to renovate the restroom that's in the complex itself. This project is a little different. This was one that we've talked about before, but to add a new restroom behind the tennis complex so there's access to the trail and the tennis facility. So you could enter on both sides, and I think that would be a great amenity for that area. Yeah.
Speaking of restrooms, you and I had talked a while back about possibility of putting like maybe timers and things on your locks.
Right.
So you don't have to send someone out there to lock up the bathrooms at night. Is that something you guys have
We-
pursued, or?
It is, and we've done some, I don't know how many.
3 or 4 so far.
Yeah, I think we're about 4 restrooms in. That was kind of a test pilot program, but yeah, I think that's the direction we're moving.
Okay, good.
It seems like those CXT buildings, you can get it through their company and
Yeah,
probably a pretty quick.
those are the way to go too, those
Yeah.
CXT.
With the Civic Theater terminating or giving notice of termination of the contract,
Yeah.
which is going to affect Helen Hawker, where does that fall within your 2020 budget if you have 2021 budget, if you have to assume the operations of Helen Hawker? Otherwise, you shutter Helen Hawker, which is going to be a pretty big blow to, kids that can't go to Civic Theater.
Right. So then the money that we were paying to this Topeka Civic Theater to run, so we could use those funds, but we'd have to make do. We'd have to carve it out. Yeah, unfortunately, that all happened again after this
After the
was
budget.
submitted, but it's worrisome, it really is. And of Helen Hawker, I'm concerned about the future of our agreement. I'm not sure that, we'll just have to see whether we're able to
Tim,
do that
did
moving
they-
forward or not.
We still do that theater camp out there. Probably didn't do one this year, but at Helen Hawker.
They
Yeah, they
yeah,
do,
they run it,
They did
yeah.
but it's done through Civic Theater with Helen Hawker.
So, but it's all one big camp, Civic Theater at Helen Hawker.
Yeah.
They don't have separate kids'
No,
camps? Okay.
no, I don't believe so.
Well, you register to go to Civic Theater, or you register to go to Helen Hawker.
Yeah,
In
but,
the same manner, you would register to go to one at sports camp, or you'd go to the
the lake,
lake, or you'd go to,
Crestview or?
Crestview or whatever.
Yeah.
Back to the.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
I've talked to the tennis association about pickleball,
Yeah,
and they are very open. I think the pickleball group is open to possibly doing pickleball at Felker. And instead of making a big complex at the new park, it might be a better fit, the more I think about it anyway.
Yeah.
At Felker, because it's already a sports park, and we could, do some restroom improvements that would serve both of them.
sure.
And that's a possible start planning the park, and
I agree with you. I think that definitely warrants more discussion, and I think that, and you're right, the tennis folks seem to be very much in favor of it. I think there's a little apprehension from the pickleball folks, because I think we need to, frankly, whether it's me or at a commission level, we need to sit down with them and say, we're not turning our backs on pickleball.
no,
You know,
no,
we're
I'm
not
not saying that at all. I'm just
Because
saying-
we're not gonna, maybe we don't build it out here, doesn't mean we can't build it out
You know,
there out of the same pot of
And
money.
that doesn't mean we can't put a couple courts out there, but as far as a complex where you have tournaments and
Right.
stuff, that might be a better fit at Felker, because it's just set up for sports, and it's,
And
Very
Commissioner, that
intriguing.
was one thing that I think I may have even suggested when we were in that discussion last fall, was that the only consideration though is parking at Falcon
Yeah.
currently.
there is a potential to do some parking, I think, south of the tennis courts. I looked at it one time, it's a floodplain, but I think parking's allowed and something like that,
Yeah,
but pretty good facility.
Yeah.
And once again, it's probably in the floodplain, but I think you can put recreational courts in a floodplain.
sure.
We also have a management contract with Genesis for that facility as well, too, so there'd be.
That's right.
A little less administrative cost there.
But I know when you have the big tournaments, restrooms are always a problem, and
Right.
that would warrant having more restrooms. And
I think there's even been discussion about a joint clubhouse facility
Yes.
maybe that would
Yeah.
tie the two together, and there's a lot of neat possibilities.
almost possible. All right. Any other questions regarding that? I had a question about the mini train.
Yeah.
When they were looking at the mini train, at any expansion of the track as it's laid out now, or just the same footprint we have now?
I believe that what they looked at was only the same footprint.
Okay.
In every discussion that I've had, we've talked about this hopefully coinciding with a Gage Park master plan where we could do something a little bigger and maybe even use it as a mode of transportation throughout the park. But all that they looked at was the existing tracks in this current.
Yeah, we've looked at other possibilities there, but what about the train itself? Is that another issue? I know we've dropped a new engine in that thing about every 15 years, it seems like.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing right now from Brent is it's the transmission that is the issue. Apparently that transmission was a transmission that, excuse me, that was used in a forklift, and that forklift company got bought out by John Deere, and then they kept making the parts for a while, but now they're not making them anymore. So we have an extra one, so at least we have that if something does happen, but it's a little dicey right now because it's just hard to get parts for it, so.
So, you have to catch me up on this, something about the tracks earlier that.
Yeah, Brent Holstetter, and John may be able to speak even more to this, but he brought in a company that does this. They evaluated the tracks. He literally walked the entire length of the tracks, and there were X number of railroad ties that are rotting, that need to be replaced. There are inclines and curves that don't meet regulation. There's areas where we go across sidewalks and roads where the signage, it really needs to have like the arm, not just for effect, but for safety. So there's a lot of different things that need to be done,
Okay.
so.
Well, I've wondered about that actually,
Yeah.
as I've been riding on the train over the years. that,
Yeah,
Like, oh, we're going across an intersection, this doesn't seem safe at all.
yeah, I have the same
Okay.
thought, so.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
on your capital improvement plan, the saloon at Old Prairie Town, you've got listed as a, $1 million investment over 2 years. Is that really appropriate to have it in year 1 and year 2, given now the partnership with the Great Overland Station? Or should we look at maybe moving that into years 4 and 5? I know that that's been a discussion for
Sure.
a long time, or is that something that we maybe even look at putting on a hold? I mean, again, we've talked about the saloon at Old Prairie Town as being that enhancement for weddings and receptions
Right.
for people that get married at Ward Mead. But is that better suited there, or is that better used in conjunction with the Great Overland Station now?
Oh, well, I think you make a good point, and I think that the Great Overland Station will provide that sort of companion piece, so there's a possibility that we could wait. I mean, ultimately, that's a decision for you three, but I also think when you throw in something like the mini train, if as much as I like the idea of the Great Overland Station, and I mean, of the saloon, thank you. And I've seen the plans, I think it would be magnificent. I think it would be a fabulous addition there. But if I have to choose between doing that next year and fixing the train, I probably would lean towards fixing the train because it's a safety issue. But,
We could roll it back a year.
yeah, roll it back a year.
Uh,
I do think though that there's a lot of nostalgia with that train wrapped up with the community. And I think it's a real good opportunity for the Parks for All Foundation to try and raise some money
I do
to
too.
get some of that done. And I think they would have a relatively easy time coming up with the cash.
And I think they've already started working on it, so I don't have any good news to report, but I think unfortunately, this is just a bad time to be trying to raise money. But I think you're right, though, that this is something that I think people will get behind. And the last thing you want to do is have something bad happen on that train, because of those things that you just mentioned. Everybody has, I have memories of coming over here and bringing my kids over here, so we want to protect that.
Back to the Great Overland Station, I really think, though, it will work very well in concert with Ward Mead. We have a lot of
Yeah.
weddings at Ward Mead and no wedding receptions.
Absolutely.
Because we don't have a room big enough, and this will allow us to offer some new packages, I think that'll be
Yeah,
pretty nice.
yeah, I'm excited about it.
And,
Be a good fit.
just as long as I don't have to deal with brides and their mothers, I'm good. Any other questions on the CIP?
No.
All right.
All right, well, that wraps it up for me,
Uh,
unless you have anything else.
Thank you, Tim.
All right, thank you.
Steph, did we have anybody else that wanted to speak? We got a few minutes here if anybody wanted to. Jim, did you have something?
Yeah, I haven't been here for a while, so maybe.
Yeah, you might as well.
Pardon me, I'm coming from an eye appointment, so if I squint at you, my eyes are still dilated.
I'm Bill. This is
I guess I wanted to address 3 or 4 things briefly if I could. One was, planning is the heartblood of a Parks and Rec system because you're always planning for the next generations. The basic budget for Parks and Rec or the capital budget should have some money in there on an annual basis for planning, so park staff do not have to scrape for money to initiate plans because they are indeed planning for the next 50 to 100 years. So I would hope that the budget reflects that, or we can include it in the capital consideration some way. I wanted to confirm one thing, and I've had this understanding for some time, and I wanted to make sure the only source for capital improvement funds right now are the budget component that you include in the general fund each year, any unused budget funds that might be rolled back, and any debt that you issue. Is that still correct, or?
Well, there's one additional. The department does budget out of their general fund budget so much that they transfer at the beginning of the year to the building maintenance fund, whether, I don't know if it's split between 3R or if it all goes to 3R. That would be, Linda would know that one. But they do budget so much that it's transferred.
Right.
Then at the end of the year, if there's excess funds,
It can
they
also-
generally ask to transfer
Okay.
those. And then, like you said, capital outlay and then any new debt.
My point being, at this point, there is no other mechanisms to raise capital funds per se from either any type of assessments or grants or funds unless they apply for
Well,
them.
they're always looking for grants.
Right.
I mean, like the trail grants, that we have certainly the one that's coming up for the Deer Creek Trail, that is a grant with the state, and so there's, and they've had other grants throughout the year.
Mhm.
There was a grant for, what was it, Burnett's Mound. So there's always
They're
grants.
limited, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like some of them are sizable, like this Deer Creek Trail one is a sizable amount. So that is one. I also didn't mention that the revolving fund, as it builds up reserves, it can be a source for capital projects also.
Okay. The third point, and I've addressed this before with you, is that the prioritization of projects is always a sticky wicket because it's real subjective as to who thinks what needs to be done at what point in time. And I guess I still maintain that Parks and Rec is such a huge, diverse operation with so many different needs for capital improvements, and Commissioner Cook, you pointed out that they eclipse some of the other departments, and I understand you can't really compare all the departments one-on-one. I mean, but this one, because of this huge diversity in what they have to handle, now we've added more with the Overland Station. Their need for capital improvements fund, whether it be for deferred maintenance or even new projects, which are limited, the prioritization of trying to determine how you do that is so very important. I still don't think, I think Tim's made some great strides, I think, in trying to get a better handle on that array of projects and trying to prioritize them in some of the needs, especially the planning and the ADA issues and the safety issues. But I think that the department still needs more of a formalized prioritization priority system internally to the professionals of the group that gets community input, that gets commission input, and their professional input to actually determine the priorities. We all know that the priorities of some of these items that are on this list or that are also underway are subject to the whims of political whims, financing whims, and you know, we do not have a prioritization methodology that really comes out of the department from a professional park and rec standpoint with the, you know, input from the community and the input from you all. So I think the key thing that as you look at these CIP projects, that needs to be addressed. Could I give you a very, very good, in my mind, example? And I think, as Commissioner Rippon knows, Gage Park is an important item in this town. For now, the last several years, well, in 2017, we reached the point of actually negotiating a contract to have the Gage Park Master Plan completed, and then it was put aside for several different reasons. And then the family park came up and other things, and now we're talking about many and different things that, yes, everybody wants these items, and Gage Park remains, I guess, in a forgotten sense. You know, it is the heart of the city, heart of the county. That master plan was to set the stage for its next 100 years. And yet we're moving on, and I hear no mention, it's on the list, but you know, to me, the prioritization of these projects, I think if you would ask a lot of the Parks and Rec staff, Gage Park would probably rise to the top, and the mini train is just part of it. The issues associated with the zoo expanding, the stormwater issues, the parking issues, a true prioritization system that originates in Parks and Rec and gets the input and then comes back, I think would bring those kind of projects to the fore. And some of these other projects, even though we'd really like to have them, would drop down. So I would really ask that you relook Gage Park as a priority, even now, to get the study going, and then look at having the Parks and Rec develop a higher level prioritization system, so that in the future, you know, you all are sitting here and you're elected to make tough decisions. You got one of the toughest jobs in the world, especially now. But you've got to make those decisions with information, and I think truly, and I've worked with priority systems, and again, they're all subjective to a certain degree. You never can be totally objective, but they can give you a better informed array of information to make some decisions. And so I think it's just extremely important as we go on, whether or not we can do some of it this year or not, but keep looking at that process. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer, attempt.
Well, I mean, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Jim, your comments are well taken about Gage Park, especially when you consider how does the train interact with the tracks, and now the storm pond pole, the
Pit.
Helen Hawker, what's the future of Helen Hawker? You know, the zoo expansion, the state of the Children's Discovery Center, how does the Discovery Center interact with the development of Gage Park? I mean, all of these things are intertwined with each other several times over.
I agree. You just look at what's happened in the last couple of years. It's amazing and that's not slowing down right now. And that progress needs to be directed in some fashion. Right now, it's just happening out there.
But if you were to look at like the Helen Hawker Theater, the Helen Hawker Theater now has no parking
Yeah.
because of the zoo expansion. But, it kind of serves a need as a theater in the park. And if there's not, is that the best place? I know it's a sacred object for many, many people in the community, because they have a lot of historical ties or memories of the theater there, but can it be redone, or should it be redone, and where does that fall in the master plan? And that's a bigger discussion than just even here today.
I have to, and as Commissioner Rippon knows, I have a personal involvement with Gage Park, because I've had my class of sixth graders working on it for 2 years now. They presented a presentation to the Shawnee Heights Board the other day. They had to do it voiceover because of COVID. I will tell you that the 5th, 6th graders have made more progress on Gage Park than this county has. And I think Mr. Gage wouldn't be very proud of that, quite frankly. And they addressed the type of things you're talking about. Gage Park is everything in a recreational system, all plopped down onto one piece of territory over time. And it's being morphed in by Kay's Garden, the lack of parking, the stormwater, when we met with Helen Hawker, you bet they want to stay there. They want to move, there's so many different things there. Whereas Gage Park used to be way out in the countryside, it's the heart of the city now. It's the heart of park and recreation system. And I grant that family park planning is important, it should be there. I grant that Lake Shawnee activities should be looked at, the neighborhoods, et cetera. But I'm here to tell you that when my family members come into town, we go to Gage Park. I've been there 5 times in the last 3 months. People go there, it is the heart of the city, and we as a county are neglecting our duty, I think, in that sense. I'd be happy to provide you with their presentation if you'd like to see it.
Would like to see it. Yes.
I would like to explain for Commissioner Mays what we currently do on the priority of the CIP project. Each department, as they submit their project, give it a priority of either critical, high, normal, or low. I don't know how they come up with those, priorities, but the department submits that with each of the projects. And then that is what I pass on my spreadsheet to each of you. So, but I don't know how.
Thank you, because, and I'm not, I don't want to negate that, that's a start. But that's a 50,000-foot priority system.
Yes.
You guys collectively hire professionals to do your Parks and Rec planning and carry out all this activity. You all have a vested interest in putting your views forth on how this money's spent. And I'm sure, you hear from the public too. All I'm saying is that a priority system that takes into account their planning and their efforts, their expertise, your input and additional input from the public each year on this is doable. And for the diversity of the Parks and Rec system, I think it's different than the Department of Corrections or something like that. I mean, they have huge budgets and everything, but, the diversity that they have to deal with is immense. And so I'm just asking that, you go down and develop a much more rigorous. Again, you can never be fully objective, and you just can't do it, but you can be better informed, I think, than you are now by far.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Jim. You know, one of the other issues with the Gage Park that we didn't have for years is it's actually, there's two landlords there. You work with the city and the county, and it's just another reason the thing needs to be planned.
And I know we have others that want to speak, but I just
Okay.
wanted to make one comment on that, and I think Jim did a good job of explaining it, but from my perspective and the department's perspective, being in limbo sort of on this master plan at Gage Park makes it hard for us to really do anything other than just maintain. So we've talked about renovating the dog park, we're talking about doing things to the tracks. All those things are out there, but in the back of your mind, you feel like you're kind of getting the cart ahead of the horse. We need it, so having a plan would make those things a lot easier, and I think make us all feel better about it.
We have 4 minutes left, and then we have to move on to another budget hearing because they are streamed.
Oh, I didn't know they were streamed.
You're live.
My name is Terry Roberts. I'm a registered nurse, and I am not here in my capacity as the chairperson of the advisory committee. I just have some personal comments. Really, they relate to this whole COVID-19, what has happened to Parks and Rec as a result of COVID-19. First, the Great Overland Station donation, okay? They had talked about it, but then this was the impetus for, we need to make something happen. The TCT withdrawal of their contract, Helen Hawker, COVID-19 related. Not completely, but it pushed them. Then the last, which we spoke a little bit about at the last advisory committee meeting I was at, is the trail and trail safety. The trails have been used phenomenally higher, at a higher rate than they previously are. We have counters, and we can provide that information to you. But we wanted to make sure that we had trail safety. We did have a death on one of our trails, and we just want to make sure that, we continue to provide the concrete and the safety areas on the trail for those people who are using it. Because we know that the social distancing, that our parks have become one of the outlets, the few outlets that we have, that we can have outside our homes for families. And I just wanted to make those comments. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's conclude this now so we can get ready for the next one. We got just a few minutes before we start the weed department's budget hearing, so.
I might just wrap up with one thing.
Yes.
Just to let you all know that the capital improvement discussions will be on Thursday's agenda for the commission.